Welcome to my channel, The Orchid Hut. My name is Dana if you're new here, and thank you for taking your time to watch one of my videos today. This is going to be video number 2 in my new playlist called the Neophyte series. And at the end of this video, I will be putting a link to the first video in this playlist because I think that one is useful to watch so that you can kind of see how all of the videos in this playlist are linked together. Just kind of a brief recap of that first video. I was giving my top 5 pointers for new orchid growers, and one of those pointers was to start with an intermediate type orchid like the Phalaenopsis. And so today's video is going to lead off from that idea. And what I'm going to do is take 6 of my Phalaenopsis orchids, and we will be following them throughout the year 2022. Now, the purpose of this is so that you can kind of see what the expected progress is of a Phalaenopsis over the course of a year, so that you can see the cycle of its growth. What's normal, maybe what's not normal, depending on what happens with my orchids. And just so that you can kind of maybe even compare your first Phalaenopsis orchids to mine. However, you do have to be a little bit careful with a comparison to another grower's orchids because we are likely in very different environments, and the things that orchids do or don't do are often very tightly linked with where and how you are growing them. I'm in Southeast Texas, which is a very, very humid climate, although the winter season has a lot of ups and downs with the weather. So, where you are may be different and your growing conditions may be different, and even the things that happen with your orchids could kind of be skewed by a month or 2 or 3, because my growing season is from about March until October, but yours is probably different if you live farther north than I do. Okay, so what we're going to start with is my growing environment for these orchids. Okay, now they are all indoors year-round, and for the winter, so this is January, so for the winter time, my indoor temperatures on a colder day range from about 62 to about 65, so I don't have a lot of difference in my temperature from day to night. We do have indoor central heating, which is a furnace. At night, we turn it down so that it doesn't come on unless it gets colder than 62. And then during the day, I don't turn it up all that much. So on a cold day, there's not a lot of temperature differentiation between day and night. However, we do have many days during the winter season here that are warm outside, like 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So on those days, the nighttime temperature may still drop into the low 60s, but the daytime temperature in the house just naturally may warm up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So on a warm day, the temperature may range from about 62 degrees Fahrenheit to maybe about 70 during the day. Now, the humidity in my house during the winter probably varies a bit more than it does the rest of the year. On the days where the central heating comes on a bit more, the air in the house is drier, and that may or may not affect when I choose to water my Phalaenopsis orchids. But for the most part, our weather outside tends to be more humid, so the humidity in my house ranges in the wintertime anywhere from about probably 50% to 70% humidity. So it doesn't get super low even on the days when the heat is running in the house, simply because our humidity outside is usually still pretty high. Okay, So what we're going to do, since this is the first video for the year 2022 in the wintertime, I'm going to give you the background of each one of these orchids, and hopefully you can see on the pots I've already numbered them. So they are all no ID Phalaenopsis. The two on this side are large Phalaenopsis. The two in the middle are sort of mid-size Phalaenopsis, and then the two on this side are minis. So I chose two from each of the different sizes that you can typically find Phalaenopsis orchids in. And you know, when you purchase your first 2 or 3 plants, you probably want to consider size and what you have space for. All right, so let's start with the large Phalaenopsis on this side. And I have had both of these 2 large orchids in my care for many years. This one, number 1, bloomed last year, but it bloomed in the summer. It does not have a spike yet, but it's doing well. It has, you know, a good root system in the pot. And the bark is relatively fresh because I just repotted it at the end of last spring, beginning of the summer. So I will not need to be repotting this one this year. It's just going to stay here, and we will see if it blooms again in the summer. This next large Phalaenopsis has a bloom spike for this year. However, it did not bloom the last previous 2 years. So it kind of went into a 2-year cycle where it did not produce a bloom spike. This one is due to be repotted this year. So after the blooming is over, I will be doing that, and I will make sure that I film it for this playlist so that you can follow along with a repot of a Phalaenopsis in great detail. Okay, and then the two sort of mid-sized Phalaenopsis here in the middle, so this would be number 3 and 4, are newer to my collection. So I've had both of these for about 4 months. The previous 2 are just your typical grocery store, no ID Phalaenopsis. These 2 are also no ID, but they were purchased at a nursery that grew more orchids. The one at the top here has a bit of a, I would say, poorer root system. So that's why it has the little sort of A-frame stake on the top to sort of stabilize it in the pot until it's able to grow a bit better root system to stabilize it. But it does have a spike, a little tiny spike right down here. And you know, this one, it's a healthy plant, but it does need to kind of reestablish its root system. Okay, now the 2 mini Phalaenopsis on this side do not have spikes. They have also not bloomed for me in the last 2 years. So both of them are due for a repot this year. I am still waiting to see if they're going to bloom before I just jump into that. But they are, you know, healthy plants. They've got good root systems, as well as this one. And sometimes Phalaenopsis spikes are a bit delayed just because my growing season and my climate is a bit different than other parts of the States. So there's still hope for those to send out spikes all the way through maybe like March. And the next update on these orchids will be in 3 months. So this is the end of January. So February, March, April. So at the end of April, I will bring all of these orchids back so that we can look at how they have changed and how they are doing over the course of 3 months. Now, let's just kind of go back and recap so we can remember. 2 has a spike, and both of these 2 mid-size Phalaenopsis both have spikes, and the 2 minis do not. So there are 3 with spikes and there are 3 without. So that's kind of a good balance there. Some of them are due to be repotted. I will make sure to video that, as I mentioned previously. And for the winter, the way that I'm caring for these is that they're all in my bay window. It is an eastern exposure, although the sun in the sky right now is very, very low. So we've had a lot of dim and dark, dreary days. They're not getting a lot of light, but that's, that's okay for the winter season. I do have to be very, very careful about watering. Sometimes they need water every 7 days. Sometimes I'm waiting as long as 10 days before I'm watering. And as far as feed goes, they are getting just a pinch of orchid fertilizer, maybe twice a month, very, very weak, simply because they are growing bloom spikes and they need that little bit of food to help them produce the best bloom spike that they can. There's not a lot of root development going on right now. That happened previously, last year. Although out of the 6, this one mini Phalaenopsis is choosing to put on a new leaf at this time of the year, which is a little bit unusual, but not completely uncommon. It just, orchids do what they want when they want to do it. And because this one is trying to grow this new leaf, the little bit of feed that I'm giving them will help that leaf continue to grow very, very slowly, just because of the season that we're in. Okay, so next update on these 6 orchids will be in 3 months. We'll see how their bloom spikes are doing. We will see how their growth is doing. And hopefully you will follow along with my 6 Phalaenopsis orchids. And if you have any questions about yours along the way, please feel free to post them in the comments. I'm happy to answer all questions that I can. And the link to the first video in this series, which I recommend watching so that you understand how all of the videos link together here, I'll put a link in the upper right hand corner to that video. And if you enjoyed or liked this one, please give it a thumbs up, and the subscribe button will be coming up in the bottom right hand corner of the screen. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video, whatever that may be.